Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to Eagle News International on tonight's headlines. Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky makes a fresh appeal for talks with Moscow as Russia says its soldiers have entered the center of besieged port city of Mariupol. UN Chief Antonio Guterres warned that the world must act to prevent a hurricane of hunger and a meltdown of the global food system following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Ukraine-Russia conflict is expected to have a limited direct impact on the Philippines' trade sector, that according to a Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas official. And a mass of hot air from the Sahara Desert dumped dust on large parts of Spain, including Madrid on Tuesday, coloring the sky orange and coating cars and streets. First in our news, Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky makes a fresh appeal for talks with Moscow as Russia said its soldiers have now entered the center of the besieged port city of Mariupol. Take a look.
Ми завжди наполягали на переговорах, ми завжди пропонували діалог, пропонували рішення для миру не тільки протягом 23 днів вторгнення. І я хочу, щоб мене зараз почули всі, почули особливо в Москві. Настав час зустрічатись, час говорити, настав час відновлювати територіальну цілісність і справедливість для України. Інакше...
As bitter fighting between local forces and Russian troops rages across the country, more than 3 weeks into the invasion, the two sides are already holding negotiations remotely. But so far, as in previous rounds, the talks have yielded little progress, with both sides blaming the other, and none have been at the presidential level. Russia's offensive remains largely stalled, a U.S. defense official said, with troops about 30 kilometers east of the capital, Kiev, and facing heavy resistance. But Russia's defense ministry said Friday that the army and its separatist allies had made a breakthrough in Mariupol, which has been under Russian shelling for days, and were now inside the city. On Friday, rescuers were still searching for hundreds of people trapped under the wreckage of a bomb theater there. At the time of the attack, Mariupol City Council said over 1,000 people were sheltering in the theater's basement when it was hit on Wednesday. And in the south of Ukraine, the mayor of Mykolaiv, Alexander Senkevich, said on Facebook that several villages in the region had been occupied and the city had been under heavy fire, calling it a difficult day. Ukrainian media reported that Russian forces had carried out a large-scale strike on Mykolaiv, killing at least 40 Ukrainian soldiers at their brigade headquarters. Earlier, Russian missiles had struck an aircraft repair site close to the Lviv's airport in Ukraine's far west, extending the war to a relatively unscathed region near the border with NATO member Poland. The Russian Defense Ministry said the strike was a high-precision attack on Ukrainian military infrastructure. In Kiev, authorities said one person was killed when a Russian rocket struck residential tower blocks in the southwestern suburbs. They said a school and playground were also hit. More than 3.25 million refugees have fled Ukraine. Meanwhile, hundreds of civilians are now feared trapped under a bombed-out theater in the besieged city of Mariupol. Russian forces pressed their lethal attacks on Ukrainian cities with shelling and missiles. Earlier, human rights ombudswoman Lyudmila Denisova reported 130 survivors had been rescued from the rubble, but said there was still no information on more than 1,000 other people official figures suggest were sheltering there when the bomb fell. Ukraine accuses Russia of carrying out the powerful airstrike that destroyed the theater on Wednesday. Russia has denied bombing the theater or attacking civilians. The Ukrainian authorities have not confirmed the number of possible casualties. Meanwhile, Russia used its newest Kinzhal hypersonic missiles for the first time in Ukraine on Friday to destroy a weapons storage site in the country's west, according to the Defense Ministry. The Russian Defense Ministry said the Kinzhal aviation missile system with hypersonic aero-ballistic missiles, destroyed a large underground warehouse containing missiles and aviation ammunition in the village of Delyatin in the Ivano-Frankivsk region. State news agency RIA Novosti said it was the first use of the Kinshal hypersonic weapons during what Moscow calls a special military operation in the pro-Western Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin has termed the Kinshal or dagger missile an ideal weapon that flies at 10 times the speed of sound and can overcome air defense systems. The Kinshal missile was one of an array of new weapons Putin unveiled in his State of the Nation address in 2018. Meanwhile, here in the country, President Duterte reiterated that the Philippines would remain neutral in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. In a speech delivered in Palo Leyte, Duterte refused to take sides, saying he would rather not meddle in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The president said he is hurt by what is happening in Russia, which is at war with Ukraine, because President Vladimir Putin is his personal friend. Let's listen in.
We have to end this stupid war. So we better atong neutrality na to, we just maintain it. Palayo taron di ita maapil. Hindi natin awayan, huwag tayong makialam. And because sinabi na nga sa lahat ng scientists, if it goes nuclear, that's the end of the world. Tapos na talaga lahat. You will suffer for a long time of a planet which is radioactive all over, and you cannot plant anything, and you will just die of hunger. Those are the stakes there. Ako dyan sa Russia, nasasakitan ako. Kaibigan ko si Putin. He's a personal friend. Kaduhar kong balik Russia.
The Philippines were among the nations that voted for a UN resolution expressing explicit condemnation of Russia's assault on Ukraine. The president stressed that he will not allow the Philippines to get involved in this conflict, even if the U.S., a long-standing ally of the country, is involved. To the U.S. now, President Joe Biden laid out to Chinese leader Xi Jinping the consequences of any backing for Russia in its war against Ukraine, according to the White House, as Beijing showed no sign of joining Western condemnation of the invasion. The comments also came during a nearly 2-hour phone call between the leaders of the world's two largest economies, focusing on Ukraine, where China's close ally Russia is in the 4th week of a bloody assault. Take a look.
The president detailed, what the implications and consequences would be if China provides material support to Russia as it conducts brutal attacks against Ukrainian cities and civilians. And obviously that is something we will be watching and the world will be watching.
So that concern hasn't gone away following the call?
Obviously actions are a key part of what we'll be watching. The majority of this call, as I think you heard, you saw in the readout and you heard, I think, on the call we just did, but was focused on Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. The president spent the vast majority of the nearly 2 hours was spent with the president outlining the views of the United States and our allies and partners on this crisis, including a detailed overview of efforts to prevent and then respond to the invasion, how we got here, steps we've taken, where we've gone and why. Movement of China to align with Russia, or to the movement of them to align with Russia, or their proximity of moving closer together, is certainly of great concern to us, as we have expressed, and we are not the only country that has expressed that concern, including many other members of the G7 have expressed exactly that concern. So this is part of the discussion. It has been an ongoing part of the discussion. Expect it certainly would be when the president goes to Europe next week. China has to make a decision for themselves about where they want to stand and how they want the history books to look at them and view their actions. And that is a decision for President Xi and the Chinese to make.
However, there was no mention of direct criticism of Russian President Vladimir Putin, and a readout from the Chinese Foreign Ministry laid some responsibility for Russia's invasion of its neighbor to the west. With the Chinese leader refusing to condemn Putin, Washington fears Beijing could go further, delivering financial and military support to Russia and transforming an already explosive transatlantic standoff into a global dispute. If that were to happen, not only could China help Russia to weather sanctions and continue the war, but Western governments would face the painful decision of how to strike back at the world's second biggest economy, likely prompting turmoil on international markets. Washington is racing to ward off that crisis, both by warning of fallout for China and appealing to President Xi's ambitions to be a world leader. In other news, Chinese and U.S. warships sailed through the flashpoint Taiwan Strait on Friday. According to Taiwanese and U.S. officials, shortly before China's Xi Jinping issued a warning to Joe Biden that ties could suffer if there is a mishandling of the island's status. The two warships sailed through the strait, which separates China from Taiwan, hours before the highly anticipated nearly 2-hour call between the two presidents over the Ukraine crisis and other topics. Washington has remained Taipei's most important ally and leading arms supplier, despite switching diplomatic recognition to Beijing in 1979. The Taiwan Strait is a flashpoint for the world's navies. China regards Taiwan as its territory and has vowed repeatedly to seize it one day by force if necessary. Washington says the strait is an international waterway. Meanwhile, UN Chief Antonio Guterres warned that the world must act to prevent a hurricane of hunger and a meltdown of the global food system following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Secretary General told reporters in New York that the war risks sparking far-reaching consequences for the global food supply that will have a devastating impact on the poorest. Take a look.
This war goes far beyond Ukraine. It is also an assault on the world's most vulnerable people and countries. While war reigns over Ukraine, a sword of Damocles hangs over the global economy, especially in the developing world. Food, fuel, and fertilizer prices are skyrocketing. Supply chains are being disrupted, and the costs and delays of transportation of imported goods, when available, are at record levels. And all of this is hitting the poorest, the hardest, and planting the seeds for political instability and unrest around the globe. 45 African and least developed countries import at least 1/3 of their wheat from Ukraine and Russia. 18 of those countries import at least 50%. This includes countries like Burkina Faso, Egypt, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. We must do everything possible to avert a hurricane of hunger and the meltdown of the global food system.
Russia and Ukraine represent more than half of the world's supply of sunflower oil and about 30% of the world's wheat, noting that Ukraine alone provides more than half of the world's food program's wheat supply. As a direct response, he announced the establishment of a new UN Global Crisis Response Group on Food, Energy, and Finance based at the Secretariat in New York to be overseen by Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed. More than 3.2 million people have now fled Ukraine, and millions more are internally displaced. Meanwhile, the United Nations warned that humanitarian needs are becoming ever more urgent across war-ravaged eastern Ukraine, with a potentially fatal lack of food, water, and medicines in besieged cities. Take a look.
The humanitarian situation in cities such as Mariupol and Sumy is extremely dire, with residents facing critical and potentially fatal shortages of food, water, and medicine. The humanitarian needs within the country, and particularly in the east, are becoming even more urgent. More than 200,000 people are now without access to water across several localities in Donetsk Oblast, while the constant shelling in Luhansk region has destroyed 80% of some localities, leaving 97,800 families without power.
We need two sides of the armed conflict to agree with each other a mechanism with modalities, standard operating procedures, into actually minute detail how such safe passages, either for movement of humanitarian supplies, or on the other hand, for evacuation of civilians, how that can be established.
Since Russia launched its invasion on February 24, several cities in the east, from Sumy in the north to Mariupol in the south, have been effectively besieged, cut off, and face near constant attack. Local officials in Mariupol say more than 2,000 people have died in indiscriminate shelling and 80% of its housing has been destroyed. UNHCR says more than 3.2 million people have fled Ukraine in the 3 weeks of war, with millions more displaced internally. Across Ukraine, 13 million people need humanitarian assistance, it added. Meanwhile, Belgium has decided to postpone its planned 2025 nuclear phase-out by 10 years due to concerns about soaring energy prices caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. An important decision, says Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo. Let's listen in.
Détail, mais c'est important que le gouvernement fédéral montre cet acte politique de la volonté de pouvoir prolonger le réacteur pour une période de 10 ans. Okay, bedankt.
Now, prices have skyrocketed for Europeans since the invasion by Russia of Ukraine, and EU leaders will meet next week to agree on fresh emergency measures to soften the blow for consumers and businesses. Belgium currently operates 2 nuclear power plants with a total of 7 reactors. The promise of a gradual phase-out of nuclear power has been enshrined in Belgian law since 2003, and the decision again to delay the moratorium was fiercely resisted by the Greens party. And Russian state television cut President Vladimir Putin's speech mid-sentence as he was addressing tens of thousands of supporters at Moscow's main football stadium. As the Russian leader was addressing crowds, state television switched to showing a clip of patriotic music. Putin was cut mid-sentence as he was saying it so happened that the beginning of the operation coincided by chance with the birthday of one of our outstanding military. And now let's listen in.
Так получилось, что начало операции совпало, совершенно случайно совпало с днем рождения одного из наших выдающихся военно... Вперед, Россия! Вперед, Россия! Вперед, Россия! Одного из наших выдающихся военно... Вперед, Россия! Вперед, Россия! Вперед, Россия!
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Nako, tigilan niyo na yung pagiging marites nyo. Kasi sa eleksyon, bawal yan!
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, ang pagkakalat ng maling impormasyon para manlinlang ng botante ay isang election offense.
Ano na naman?
Galit agad? May balita ako sa'yo. Ayon sa survey, panalo na daw si...
Teka! Total, mahilig kang magbalita. Ano nga palang balita sa utang mo sa akin?
Ha? Utang? Teka, Shopee ka. Ako.
Ayos ha. Sa chismis, snappy. Sa utang, Shopee. Ako si Mr. Bawal na nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang chismis sa eleksyon, bawal yan.
A public service message of Net25. Formata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. China reported 2 COVID deaths today, its first in more than a year, underlining the threat posed by an Omicron outbreak that has triggered the country's highest case count since the pandemic's onset. The National Health Commission said both deaths occurred in Jilin, the northeastern province, which has been hardest hit by a nationwide rise in cases that has prompted lockdowns or tight restrictions in several cities. The deaths were the first reported in mainland China since January 2021 and bring the country's death toll from the pandemic to 4,638. China reported 4,051 new infections today, down from 4,365 the day before, according to the Health Commission, with more than half of the new cases in Jilin. Beijing's communist leadership has touted the low death rate relative to other countries as evidence of the strength of its one-party governance model. The 2 new deaths were buried in the Health Commission's daily report, and state-controlled media made little mention of them. Officials in Jilin later said both victims were male, 65 and 87 years old, and both had a range of underlying health problems associated with advanced age. In other news, thousands of protesters in war-torn Syria's rebel enclave of Idlib marked 11 years since the start of an anti-government uprising buoyed by the global outcry over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Gathered on the main square in the northwestern city of Idlib, more than 5,000 people took part in one of the largest rallies the beleaguered region has seen in months. Many of the demonstrators hoped the war launched by the Syrian government's main backer, Russia, in Ukraine would rekindle interest in their cause. Thousands of demonstrators marked the date in other cities across rebel-held northern Syria. President Bashar al-Assad's grip on power held by a thread after a nationwide uprising that erupted on March 15, 2011, escalated into a fully fledged civil war. Israeli police officers collected bloodied clothing on a sidewalk after they shot a Palestinian assailant who stabbed a passerby. The attack took place in West Jerusalem near the boundary with the city's eastern sector. According to the Magen David Adom Emergency Services, the Israeli in his mid-30s was slightly injured. Take a look.
I heard a very loud gunshot, and I just simply saw a person laying on the ground. This is a safe neighborhood. You know, we love our neighborhood, and we don't want problems here.
I lived here through the different intifadas, and I was involved in a lot of rescue missions. I saw a lot of bad things, and so I'm used to it.
The Magen David Adom Emergency Services said the Israeli in his mid-30s was lightly injured. Its spokesman, Zaki Heller, said the assailant was a Palestinian man who was about 20 years of age and was evacuated in serious condition. Clashes erupt frequently in Jerusalem, a city at the heart of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Earlier this month, Israeli police shot dead 2 Palestinian assailants who stabbed officers in 2 separate incidents in Jerusalem's Old City. Israel captured East Jerusalem in the 1967 Six-Day War and later annexed it in a move not recognized by most of the international community. Palestinians claim the area as the capital of their future state. And we'll be back with more news right after this break. Stay tuned.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa new era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. The International Energy Agency urged governments to urgently implement measures to cut global oil consumption within months following supply fears stemming from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The IEA also called on the OPEC Plus group of oil-producing nations led by Saudi Arabia and Russia to help relieve the strain on markets while warning that the world faced the biggest shock to supply in decades. The outbreak of war in Ukraine has sent prices for the fuel up sharply and led to major economies such as the US and Canada sanctioning Russia by banning imports of oil. The IEA warned earlier this week of the risk of a global supply crisis as major oil companies, trading houses, shipping firms, and banks have shunned Russia. The IEA also said with the threat that supplies of Russian oil could be cut even more, there is a real risk that markets tighten further and oil prices escalate significantly in the coming months as the world enters its peak demand season. Now, the Ukraine-Russia conflict is expected to have a limited direct impact on the Philippines trade sector, that according to a Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas official. Let's listen in.
Let me just share some information on the link between the Russia and Ukraine with the Philippines. Now, the impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict remains very uncertain, but we can see that the direct impact seems to be low as the direct trade links between the Philippines and Russia or Ukraine are limited. The countries trading goods with these two countries have been minimal in terms of value and share. For example, if you look at 2021, about $120 million or 0.2% of total Philippine exports of goods were shipped to Russia, while only 5 million went to Ukraine. Meanwhile, if you look at imports, Imports from Russia and Ukraine in 2021 accounted for only 0.6% and 0.1% of the country's total imports, respectively. Most probably the bigger impact for now would also be the elevated prices of international commodities, particularly oil, as this pushes the import bill, resulting in pressure on the current account and the BOP for this year.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan opened the world's longest suspension bridge over the Dardanelles Strait in northwestern Turkey, which cuts travel time between Asia and Europe to 6 minutes. The 2.5 billion euro or $2.8 billion 1915 Canal Bridge, built by a consortium of Turkish and South Korean companies, has a main span of 2.023 kilometers between its towers painted in the red and white colors of the Turkish flag, making it longer than the previous record holder, the Akashi Kaikyo Bridge in Japan. Erdogan has often boasted of mega infrastructure projects, including a third bridge over the Bosphorus throughout his two-decade rule, first as prime minister and then president. The Turkish leader uses them as a means to drive economic growth as he eyes a re-win in presidential elections in 2023. Now, this week, Japan's northeast was rocked by a 7.3 magnitude earthquake, which lasted for more than 2 minutes, sparking a tsunami warning. We have the details from Tyranel Pilyalu from our Japan Bureau. Tyra.
Just less than a week after Japan commemorated the 11th anniversary of the Great Tohoku earthquake that caused a triple disaster in the country's northeastern region, another strong tremor jolted the country Wednesday night, leaving 4 dead, over 100 injured, millions without power, and a derailed Shinkansen or bullet train. According to Japan Meteorological Agency, the 7.3 magnitude earthquake started at 11:36 Wednesday evening. It had a preliminary epicenter of 60 kilometers or 37 miles located off Fukushima's coast, 89 kilometers or 54 miles away where the March 11, 2011 great earthquake hit. Over 2 million households in the northeast Kanto region were without electricity, including 156,000 households in the northeastern part and over 700,000 households in Tokyo. However, electricity provider Tohoku Electric Power Company said they were immediately restored after.
去年の経験からいくと、1ヶ月ぐらいでしょうか。とりあえず今、店舗にある商品をすべて他の店舗に移すという作業をして、でその後全部商品を抜いた後に、今度建屋も被害を受けてますので、建屋を修復すると。でその後にもう一度商品にセットをしますので、1ヶ月ぐらいでかかるのかな。
Authorities also issued a tsunami advisory in Fukushima and Miyagi of up to 1 meter wave, where an 8-inch tsunami occurred about an hour and a half after the quake along the coastline of Miyagi Prefecture, urging people in affected areas to stay away from the coast, authorities said. After lower waves observed, the tsunami advisory was then lifted off. According to authorities, emergency centers responded to numerous phone calls about emergencies and injuries. 4 have been reported dead. A bullet train was also derailed while on its way to Sendai from Tokyo. Japan East Railway said the Yamabiko 223 applied the brakes immediately as it detected the tremors, but 16 out of 17 cars have been derailed. 3 crews were slightly injured, but none from the 75 passengers were hurt. All 78 were trapped for 4 hours after, but were able to escape through a small emergency exit unharmed. Meanwhile, no abnormalities have been detected from the crippled Daiichi nuclear power plant, and no changes have been observed in the measurement of the radioactivity monitoring post and radioactive dust monitors in the plant. The meteorological agency urged the public to watch out for more seismic activity in the next few days. One official from the agency, Masaki Nakamura, urged people in affected areas to remain vigilant over the risk of mudslides.
マジかよ。
This is the latest for now from Tokyo, Japan. Taiwan Pilyulu, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, a mass of hot air from the Sahara Desert dumped dust on large parts of Spain, including Madrid, coloring the sky orange and coating cars and streets. Take a look. Now, people used hoses to wash down the dust in the center of the capital, where a brown film covered windows in apartment buildings. Haze created by the hot air is driven across the Mediterranean Sea by powerful winds called La Calima. The phenomenon is common in Spain and especially in the Canary Islands of Morocco. But this latest episode was extraordinary, greatly reducing visibility over swathes of the city or swathes of the country, according to Ruben Del Campo, spokesman for the state weather agency IMET. Cities from Granada in the south, Madrid in the center, and Lyon in the northeast were affected. And a beach cleanup drive called LINIS Muna BAGO ITCHA and fishing tournament was successfully organized by a Filipino community group, the Pinoy Anglers Bahrain, on March 4 at the Nurana Island. The Pinoy Anglers Bahrain is recognized by the Philippine Embassy. Here's Clem Orhaliza at the scene. Clem.
We are here right now in Nurana Island, where anglers from all over Bahrain have gathered for the LINIS Muna BAGO ITCHA cleanup drive program, where they simultaneously aim to clean up the beach and hold a fishing competition.
The PAB, or Pinoy Anglers in Bahrain, has launched a cleanup drive program promoting the cleanliness and the health of the environment over at Nurana Island, where it is a very popular fishing spot among the locals. Fishermen from all over Bahrain, including different groups, have all joined in to pick up some trash from the shoreline.
Ang aim ng event na ginawa namin ngayon, bali linis muna bago sa 9th season, makatulong sa kalinisan ng dagat ba, sa mga cleanliness.
Para maingganyo din yung ibang anglers na maging malinis din sa dagat.
Kumbaga maging responsible na lang din sa kalinisan, hindi yung puro isa lang. At least may tulong man lang din kami sa dagat. May maibalik kami sa biyayang natatanggap namin.
Ang pub nag-umpisa sa iilan members lang. Ngayon umuwi na kasi yung pinaka-founder, si Mr. Joe Matias. Ito nga pala si Mr. Fredo, yung kasama sa founder ng pub na nagbuo. Sila talaga mga original niyan. Hanggang sa dumami dahil sa samahan, sa banding, para sa mga distressed OFW na gustong tumambay din sa tabing dagat. At the same time, nag-enjoy tuwing weekend after work.
Para mabawasan yung stress ng mga OFW na hindi yung puro trabaho na lang, at least once a week, meron kami libangan, magkasama-sama kami banding.
Aim din ng grupo na to na pagkaisahin yung lahat ng may mga small group kasi ng anglers sa Bahrain. Bali yung pub, yung parang umbrella siya, parang mother group para pag-isahin. Isa lang naman yung aim ng anglers manghuli ng isa at mag-enjoy.
Tips para sa mga bagong anglers. Karamihan kasi nahihiya lumapit sa amin. Pero approachable lahat ng grupo, lalo na member ng mga pub at sa ibang mga fishing group. So nandito kami para hindi naman kami ganun ka-master, pero at least may alam kahit paano, mai-guide namin sila sa tamang setup na gagamitin. Para hindi rin masayang yung pera na bibilhin. Tamang gamit lang din. Pwede nyo i-follow yung namin, Facebook page namin, Pinoy Anglers Bahrain. At saka sa Instagram, ganun din, Pinoy Anglers Bahrain.
Pwede mag-message doon.
Pwede mag-message. Approachable yun. Anytime yun, magre-reply agad ng mga admins doon.
Saka sa mga baguhan, huwag kayo mahiya magtanong sa mga hindi naman natin masasabing master talaga. Yung kahit paano may alam na konti. Bago ka sumabak, kumbaga sa gera nga, kailangan handa ka muna bago ka sumabak sa gera.
Yung kaya ng bulsa lang, importante nag-i-enjoy.
Yes, as a beginner, yung may pap-advise namin sa kanila, wag na munang gumasa sa mga kung ano. At least pag-aralan muna nila dapat yung setup na dapat gamitin. At kung wag na munang sumabay sa uso ba. Kailangan magsimula ka sa maliit muna eh. Kumbaga, bago ka pumunta sa magagandang setup, umpisa mo muna sa yung upward ng bulsa mo muna.
Fishing is a wonderful pastime, and anglers here in Bahrain are trying to do their best to take care of the environment and seize that our habitat of the fish. Reporting from Bahrain, this is Clem Orhaliza for Eagle News International.
Thank you, Clem. Eagle News will be right back. Stay tuned.
After over 2 years in the pandemic, Metro Manila and 38 other areas in the Philippines have been downgraded to Alert Level 1 since March 1. But even so, wearing a face mask is required. Although our faces are covered most of the time outdoors, people still have different concerns regarding their looks. So how can we improve the condition of our skin without breaking the bank? In this episode, we'll talk with a very young entrepreneur who wants her clients to achieve the skin they've long dreamt of. May Nang, founder of the Lemur Corporation, will discuss how her business offers a Filipino beauty brand with a French twist.
Giving up is not an option. When you are starting up, syempre, there's a lot of trials na papasok talaga. So, don't get intimidated. Parang isipin mo lagi yung goal mo, like, bakit mo ginawa to? God will always finish what He started.
All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Welcome to Mobile Legends!
Hi, Pra! Say hi to Erwin Pinagpala. Solong anak ng politiko. Chill-chill lang. Wakir sa mundo. Until a river flips his puso over. Kiligin kay Elmo Magalona sa Panalo o Talo, it's you. Weeknights pagkatapos ng Mi Esperanza, dito lang sa Net25, Prime Time ng Pamilya. Let's get together sa init ng summer.
The 2022 BC School Sports Boys Basketball Provincial Championships was recently held at the Langley Event Center. Here's Zolty Horvath from our Canada Bureau. Zolty.
It was an incredible night in BC for high school basketball as the provincial championships took place at the Langley Event Center in front of a sold-out crowd. It was the first time in 2 years that the provincials were held due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 4 championships took place from 1A up to 4A, and EBC Sports was there for all the action. Starting in the 1A category, we had the defending champs and #1 ranked Unity Christian Flames from Chilliwack against Victoria's #2 ranked Glen Lyon Norfolk Griffins. Glen Lyon started the game strong, taking an early 10-point lead, but a huge 35-point second quarter by the Flames brought them ahead, and they never looked back, winning the title 89-71. Glen Lyon was led by grade 11 star Callum Shillington with 21 points and 7 rebounds, while Unity Christian's Levi Van Egdom took home MVP honors with 35 points and 5 rebounds. Moving on to the 2A title game, number 2 ranked Lambrook Park Lions out of Victoria battled it out against number 4 Westside Wundas of Kamloops. Lambrook Park has always been a powerhouse at the 2A level, and it showed through the first 3 quarters. Lions guard Wyatt Bernesma Stokes put up a game-leading 29 points as Lambrook entered the 4th quarter with a 52-42 lead. The Wundas from Westside dug deep and pulled off the comeback in the 4th, scoring 31 points in the final frame to win the title 73-71. This is Westside's first ever provincial basketball title. The Wundas, yes, that is their nickname, the Wundas, were led by 26 points of Callum Grimmaud and 2A MVP Caleb Azadegbo, who put up 24 points and 9 rebounds. In what was the loudest and most exciting game of the night, the 3A game featured the sold-out crowd of over 5,000 with standing room only. The number 1 ranked St. Patrick's Celtics of Vancouver came up against the number 2 ranked Elgin Park Orcas from Surrey. Elgin took a quick 15-point lead in the first, and the overrated chants started to fill the arena. But when I tell you that that did not faze the majority of the grade 11 squad from St. Pat's, you better believe it, as they slowly picked away at the lead, and with 2 minutes to go in the 4th, they took their first lead of the game. With the comeback complete, St. Pat's won the title 56-52, and my ears are still ringing from how loud the crowd was. Elgin was led by the 16 points and 12 rebounds of Lucas Rowling, while the Celtics were led by 3A MVP Irish Kokia with 29 points and 6 rebounds. Finally, onto the 4A game, which featured the number 3 ranked Burnaby South Rebels of Burnaby and the number 9 ranked Semiahmoo Thunderbirds of Surrey. This game was open and shut before the first half was over. Semiahmoo did not lead the game once, as South scored the first basket and never looked back. Burnaby South took their second title in 3 years, winning 72-57. Semiahmoo was led by grade 11 Marcus Flores with 17 points and 8 rebounds, and grade 10 Torian Lee with 14 points and 6 rebounds. Burnaby South was led by 6'9" center Karn Ojla with 22 points and 13 rebounds, and league MVP Jimmy Zaborniak with 18 points and 8 rebounds. From the BC High School Basketball Championships at the Langley Event Center in British Columbia, Canada, I'm Jolty Horvath. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Zolty. We go now from Canada, we go to the U.S., where the NASCAR racing roars back to life in California after skipping their West Coast venue last year due to the pandemic. Fans celebrated the return of NASCAR to its traditional West Coast stomping grounds at the Auto Club Speedway. The 2-mile track showcased plenty of high-speed motorsport action, with professional drivers fighting for position in their bid to capture the checkered flag. In Fontana, California, our Los Angeles team has this report.
It's 2 days of NASCAR racing action at the Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California.
Drivers hunting for season points in the Xfinity and Cup Series bring the thunder and rumble to the track that NASCAR fans have come to expect.
Drivers in the Production Alliance 300 and the 25th Wise Power 400 spoke about the plan of attack for their respective races.
The biggest thing is no mistakes today, and a brand new car at this racetrack, so saw a lot of mistakes all weekend. People spinning out, wrecking, and just hope to keep it straight today and kind of see what the car will give you.
We got to go to the back for unapproved adjustments, but we're going to we're going to go out there and we're going to get to the front.
It's going to be chaos. It's like I said, it's the first real racetrack for us in my mind other than Daytona. This place is super wide. You're going to run top to bottom. You're going to see 4 or 5 wide on restarts, and it's really hectic as a driver. So you got to be aggressive. You got to take advantage of it when you can, and it's just all in all a very entertaining racetrack.
Top finishers of the Wise Power 400 gave a summation of their performance as well as their views of racing conditions. Alan Basso, Yahe Eagle Broadcasting. Starting position today wasn't as desirable as you would have liked. How did you get the job done when basically the entire race was a fight from start to finish?
Yeah, thankfully, the races are so long that if your car is good, it doesn't matter how far back you start. We were able to get to like 12 pretty quickly, so I was very pleased with that. I wasn't sure with the unknown of dirty air and stuff how hard it was going to be to get to the front, but myself and Joey were able to drive up there pretty quickly, and they just had to adjust our car from there. We put ourselves in the game from early on and just had to kind of chip away at it and make good decisions. Both on the pit box and behind the wheel. And we were able to do that today and execute a very good race.
It was a lot of ups and downs, but overall, top 5 at the end is okay. You had a chance to win, but got close.
The racetrack was great, weather unbelievable, the fans, as always, they never disappoint. They're amazing. Some of the best fans that we'll get to see, in my opinion. So I think the conditions were amazing.
Whether in the stands of the Auto Club Speedway in Fontana or having fun at the fan zone, racegoers talked about what makes NASCAR their sport of choice.
Today's my very first NASCAR experience. I haven't done this before, but now that my husband got to sponsor a car, he's like, let's go on down. He's like, so you can have like an experience, first-hand experience, and it's been fun. My husband is actually sponsoring car 51 for Jeremy Clements, and we're just enjoying the day.
I've been a long-time NASCAR fan. I'm really excited. We actually sponsored a car for the first time. We're helping out with number 36, Alex LeBay, doing a real good job. It's a real good event for the whole family because I've got my kids here. They love it. It's something that they love the cars, they love the sounds, they love all the colors on the cars. So it's been something that we try and do almost every year for the last 5 years.
Watching a race in person, there's nothing like it. You got the fans.
Definitely the crazy fans, and then just how loud it is. You never expect it to be so loud.
For me, it's the smell. It's a smell you can't duplicate at home. Just the burning metal and the rubber. It's one of a kind. You only experience it at races.
They have a bunch of cool fan experiences. You get all the manufacturers and the sponsors all get involved to try and create a cool experience for all the fans who come out. There's a bunch of merchandise, events, freebies, that sort of thing everywhere.
It's super fun. There's a lot of free stuff. It's an energy of going fast and you want your driver to win, so it's competitive energy.
Just buy a ticket and get here, and then it'll never be the same for you. Just get a ticket, get here, and you're good to go. That's all you need to do.
Before heading off to the race, we wondered which attendees could answer our question about the NASCAR acronym. What does NASCAR stand for?
Oh. This is how far I don't know. National something.
National something racing.
National Association of Stock Car Racing.
You're wrong.
National Association.
National Association
for Stock Car Auto Racing.
Stock Car Auto Racing?
This 2-mile oval-shaped track is familiar stopping grounds for race fans who not only know what NASCAR stands for,
but who also know that when you spell out NASCAR, the word you end up with is fast and fun. 2 words.
Evan Allen, Eagle News, Los Angeles.
To other news now, 3 Russian cosmonauts blasted off to the International Space Station as Moscow's military intervention in Ukraine brought the Kremlin's relations with the West to their lowest points since the Soviet era. Russian space veteran Oleg Artemyev And rookies Denis Matveyev and Sergei Korsakov set off at 15:55 GMT. A NASA live feed showed beginning a 3-hour ride to the orbital lab where they were greeted by a crew of 2 Russians, 4 Americans, and 1 German. Now, Russian space agency Roscosmos confirmed in a statement that the trio had successfully entered orbit, beginning a half-year mission aboard the lab. In the years since Russia's 2014 annexation of the Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea triggered the first wave of Western sanctions, space has proved an outlier of cooperation between Moscow and its American and European counterparts. But tensions, even in this field, grew after Russian President Vladimir Putin appointed nationalist ally Dmitry Rogozin, an enthusiastic supporter of the current invasion, as head of Roscosmos back in 2018. Now, at present, the ISS depends on a Russian propulsion system to maintain its orbit some 250 miles or 400 kilometers above sea level, with the U.S. segment responsible for electricity and life support systems. Now, NASA has said that it continues working with all international partners, including the state space corporation Roscosmos, for the ongoing safe operations of the International Space Station. And finally, NASA's massive new rocket began its first journey to a launch pad on Thursday ahead of a battery of tests that will clear it to blast off to the moon this summer. It left the Kennedy Space Center's Vehicle Assembly Building around 5:47 in the afternoon Eastern Time and began an 11-hour journey on a crawler transporter to the Hallowed Launch Complex 39B, 4 miles away. Take a look.
Artemis 1 is an uncrewed mission up to 40 days around the orbit of the moon. And what we're doing is we're checking out all the major systems that are on Orion, of course, the launch vehicle as well. And so, you know, for us, it's an exciting time to return back to the moon, to really establish, you know, the ability to explore in longer duration, to maybe have people living on the moon for a while.
So today is a big day. We've done a lot of work to get here. You know, we've taken a vehicle that started on paper and we've now turned into a actual physical, tangible product. So now today we are going to be rolling out that product to the launch pad, and we'll be running it through the paces to make sure that's ready to be launched. So
we have been working really hard over the last 14 months to get to this point, and the team is beyond excited. We're ready to get out to the pad. There's 21 million pounds of hardware between the crawler and the mobile launcher and the Artemis headed out to the pad, so we're ready to go.
We are returning to the moon. Artemis 1 will be the first flight test of each of these components. United together, this is the first of Artemis's arrows, capable of ushering in the next chapter of human lunar exploration.
Now, NASA is targeting May as the earliest window for Artemis 1, an uncrewed lunar mission that will be the first integrated flight for SLS and Orion. SLS will first place Orion into a low Earth orbit and then, using its upper stage, perform what's called a translunar injection. This maneuver is necessary to send Orion 280,000 miles beyond Earth and 40,000 miles beyond the moon, further than any spaceship capable of carrying humans has ventured. On its 3-week mission, Orion will deploy 10 shoebox-sized satellites known as CubeSats to gather information on the deep space environment. Artemis 2 will be the first crewed test flying around the moon but not landing, while Artemis 3, planned for 2025, will see the first woman and first person of color touch down on the lunar South Pole. NASA wants to build a permanent presence on the moon and use it as a proving ground for technologies necessary for a Mars mission sometime in the 2030s using a Block 2 evolution of the SLS. As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in interesting times. Good night.
Ang susunod na programa ay